Good evening and welcome to the March 21st, 2022 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to call up Deb Moran from our staff to please lead us in the pledge. If everyone can please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Deb. Next item on our agenda is reflection, and I wanted to relate the bad news that one of our residents passed away. Pam Lindstrom was a longtime citizen activist in this town and advocate for various issues. Resident on Gaither Street for nearly 50 years, and she leaves behind her husband Richard, her daughters Abigail and Tyler, and two grandchildren, Glenn and Sammy. We saw Pam many times through the years, particularly on the issues of transportation and affordable housing, and this news was a shock to all of us, and so we send our deepest condolences to her family and friends and neighbors, and I'd like to call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Next on our agenda, we have approval of minutes, and tonight we have two sets of minutes, the first being from the regular meeting on March 7th. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mayor, I move approval of the minutes of the regular session held March 7th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Carries 4-0. And next we have the minutes from the work session on Monday, March 14th. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mayor, I move to approve the minutes from the work session on March 14th.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, it carries 4-0. Thank you all very much. Next we have appointments, and let me just pull that up. We have appointments and reappointments to various committees. What is the pleasure of the council?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the resolution of the council to confirm appointments and reappointments made by you to the Animal Control Board, Community Advisory Committee, Educational Enrichment Committee, Ethics Commission, and Historic District Commission. A 2-year term for Christopher Beard to the Community Advisory Committee, a 3-year term to the Historic District Commission for Kathleen Ramirez, reappointments to the Animal Control Board, a 3-year term for Virginia Joel, a 2-year term to the Education Enrichment Committee for Jason Wilcox, a 3-year appointment to the Ethics Commission for Ian Kessler and Sheldon Pine, and a 3-year term for the Historic District Commission for J. Rudolph Morgan.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second with a proposed friendly amendment or clarification that Kathleen Ramirez's appointment is as an alternate position. If the movement is okay with that, council member?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Okay, carries 4-0. Is anybody here whose name we just read? So raise your hand. Okay, well then we will thank them when we see them. We used to do that all the time when we had meetings in person. It was a regular thing, and I think we're all sort of getting used to having meetings together again. Okay, so next on our agenda is public comments. This is the time the Mayor and Council like to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on a topic other than what we have public hearings on tonight. We actually have 3 public hearings, one on the issuance of bonds on behalf of Asbury, the second one on the concept site plan for the car wash on 355, and then the third one on our budget. So if you're here to speak on any of those, just hold off, we're going to get to you. But if you'd like to speak on any other topic, this is the time, and we ask that you state your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. If you have more than 3 minutes worth of material to deliver to us, you can send it in writing. It'll be considered just as with oral testimony. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak tonight? Come on up, please.
Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Helen Ward, and I have lived in Gaithersburg all of my life. I'm here this evening regarding the Chestnut Street Railroad crossing. As far back as I can remember, this crossing has been known as Ward Crossing, named for merchant, Henry C. Ward, and after him, his son Carson Ward, who, as I came in, I saw the picture that Carson Ward was mayor 1904 to 06. There was no station like the one here on Summit Avenue, but there was a 9 by 13 foot waiting shed for passengers. I have this Gaithersburg book, copyright 1978, pages marked, referring to the Chestnut Street crossing and so forth. My purpose for this meeting, for being here this evening, is I think there should be an appropriate sign at the Chestnut Street crossing designating it as Ward Crossing. After all, this is a part of our Gaithersburg history. We have a number of streets in this city that have the name of many of our old-time citizens, and Chestnut Street Crossing should have an appropriate sign, Ward Crossing, placed as close to the crossing as possible. I thank you for my time.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers tonight under public comments? Going once, going twice. Okay. Tanisha.
Mayor Ashman. You have to do.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. Again, we are getting used to being back in person again. Okay, we have a couple of people who've got raised hands on Zoom. Tech team, just for anybody else on Zoom who'd like to speak and is unaware of the process, tech team, can you play the instructional video, please?
Good evening. If you've connected to the meeting tonight via Zoom and you're on a desktop or a laptop and you wish to make a public comment, we can't currently see or hear you. What you need to do, please, is wiggle your mouse around and look towards the bottom center of your screen. You should see a raised hand button. Go ahead and click on that now for us, please. Alternatively, if you've connected in via telephone, you can press *9.
Thank you, tech team. Okay, I see a couple hands raised on Zoom. Tech team, if you could bring up Amanda Shepard, please. That would be great. Amanda, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. Amanda Shepard, Hidden Forest Court. And I want to say that I appreciated the workshop last week. I learned a lot. And I also think that the city council is starting to understand that this is a real issue for the 31 people on our street. The people on our street want the city to mill and overlay our street. It's 0.4 of a mile. And I know that last week you guys talked about what you guys can do in the future, the city can do in the future to not have a street that looks like ours. But in the meantime, you're not planning on doing anything on our street that will solve the problem that the city did when they tarred our street. If my calculations are correct, you don't plan to mill and overlay our street for another 13 years. And your own experts say that microsurfacing, which you're planning to do within 3 years, isn't going to solve the problem on our street, that the tarring will come up again in short order. I also did a quick calculation. Our street has paid into the city coffers $750 at least $1,000. So, and I know that that money goes into other city projects, but to say that we haven't paid our fair share to have a decent looking street isn't reasonable. So please put us on the paving schedule for this spring or summer. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Susie Ward, please. That would be great. Susie, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Good evening. I'm Susie Ward. I live at 437 Gaither Street and have done so for 42 years. Otherwise, I grew up right outside of Gaithersburg. But the thing I'd like to say this evening is that although I realize Walnut Hill is not technically in Gaithersburg, we need a grocery store over here. So I'm just wondering if some way the city council can work with Rockville or whoever that they need to work with and see if you can't get us a grocery store, because we just don't have any place that we can really go. And I would really appreciate it if you could put some efforts into seeing what you could do about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Tech team, if you could bring up Matthew Rogers, please. Matthew, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Matthew Rogers. I live in Hidden Creek as well, and I'm just here to support what Amanda Shepard said, that we need the mill and overlay on our street. In the 19 years this community has been here, we've paid a lot of taxes, as she said, and the city spent $1,300 on maintaining our street in that entire time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Zana Joni. I'm sorry if I messed up your name. I'll look forward to hearing you say it. Just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
That's okay. My name is Zana Joni, and I also live in Hidden Creek. And I would like to echo what Amanda Shepard said about our street. And I do believe, as the other person said as well, that we have done our fair share of payment and we like to have a better looking street on our neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Tony Hudson, please. Tony, just unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just unmuted. I'm Tony Hudson. I live at 214 Tulip Drive in Deer Park and have lived there for 51 years. I'm calling the council's attention to Gaither Street. Most of our community has been paved recently, but Gaither Street has not. And I walk it every morning, and because there are no sidewalks, I walk in the street. And I'm very conscious at the upper end, closer to Old Town, the road is deteriorating in places. I actually fell a couple of years ago by tripping in it's getting deeper and deeper, the place that I tripped on. So I want to call your attention to something, part of it being paved or whatever. I don't know if there are any plans to do it, but it needs to be done for safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Do we have any other testimonies from people on Zoom? Not seeing any hands. Okay. Two things. First, I wanted to ask Tanisha regarding a plaque or some sort of commemoration of Ward Crossing. How would you suggest staff sort of look into that and report to us?
Thanks, Mayor. The staff has looked into this issue, and it's also been reviewed by the HDC. Our past practice has been when there are memorials or other family initiated or friend initiated plaques or trees or benches, typically they're sponsored or paid for by the family. And I think if I am reading between the lines with Ms. Ward, that the family is looking for the city to move that commemoration forward versus them paying for the crossing. So that's sort of where we left it, and I believe that's why they came before you this evening.
I see. Do we have any sense of what cost of such a thing would be?
I'm not sure if we researched the cost. We just took a look at what our typical procedures are.
Yeah, or it would be a deviation from our normal policy.
It would be.
Okay. All right, food for thought. And Neil, I understand you wanted to respond to something.
Sure. The comment regarding the Walnut Hill Shopping Center is actually a very timely comment because this past Friday there was a meeting of the city's Business and Economic Development Committee with a group of developers who are looking to improve that very shopping center and work with the city. And one of the reasons is that the shopping center clearly needs an upgrade, and the number one priority would be to put a new grocery store in there. So there's very good reason for optimism on that moving forward. I mean, with things like this, it doesn't happen overnight. There are many steps between now and then, but the group of developers that is working with the current owner seem to be making great progress and have a good plan that makes sense. So keep your fingers crossed, but it looks good.
Thank you, Neil. Jim, you wanted to add something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just want to ask a little bit more about the Wards Crossing possibility. What has the city done, Tanisha, as far as historic markers? Not necessarily a family recognition, but noting the connection to the railroad and the fact that it was one of the basically a founding family of the city. Do we have other historic markers across the city that recognize those kinds of locations? Maybe it could fall under that kind of a process versus what we were talking about here as far as a family marker.
I appreciate that question, council member. We actually have been in the process of reviewing all of our past practices. I don't believe that in that review of memorial tributes that we took a look at just historical markers. So I'm happy to take a look at the process again through that lens.
Great, thank you.
All right. And so with that, we're going to move from public comments to public hearings. The first public hearing we have is on the issuance and sale of economic development revenue bonds for the benefit of Asbury. And I would like to call to the podium Cheryl Guth, bond counsel, and I will let you take it away.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to start by saying how pleased I am to be here in person.
Likewise.
This is my first public hearing since February of 2020, so in person. So I appreciate the opportunity. As you indicated, my name is Cheryl Guth. I'm with the law firm of McGuire Woods. We're bond counsel to the city of Gaithersburg. The purpose of the public hearing this evening is to review the proposed issuance of bonds not to exceed $65 million for the benefit of Asbury Atlantic. The proceeds will be used for capital improvements to both the Gaithersburg facility and their facility in Solomons, Calvert County, Maryland. The approximate dividing of the proceeds between the Gaithersburg facility and the Solomons facility is approximately $55 million to the Gaithersburg facility and $10 million to the Solomons facility. You have some materials in your packet that describes this type of bond issue. It's what's also called a conduit bond. These are economic development revenue bonds issued under state law. They are not a full faith and credit obligation or a taxing power pledge of the city. They're payable solely from the revenues of Asbury. If Asbury doesn't pay their loan, the bondholders don't get paid, and they will not be looking to the city to pay them in any fashion. In addition, Asbury pays all the costs of the financing, and they also indemnify you so that if for any reason any liability would come up in the future, they would be on the hook to indemnify you and pay any costs for that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the legal structure, and we also have representatives here from Asbury and H.J. Sims, the bond underwriter, and they can answer any questions regarding the project or the financing in general.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments from anybody? Okay. Well,
I'll say something. So this is the first time I've come across one of these. Obviously, I'm new up here. But I think that it's a wonderful thing that the city can do to work with Asbury, an incredible partner that we have. We have a great relationship with Asbury, and understanding the capital improvements that this will help the community. We have several thousand of our residents living in Asbury, and I think being in a position where we're able to do this for an important partner in the city, it's a win-win, and I would be very supportive of this bond.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. And remember, we're just a public hearing here,
Yeah.
so, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. In the packet, it talked about the 50% owner of Therapy Edge. I've forgotten my glasses tonight, so I'm going to go off memory. And an unrelated partner, and the person or the firm wasn't named. Do you know who that is?
I do not. I'd be happy to call up someone from Asbury that might be able to answer that
Sure.
question specifically.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andy Joseph. I'm the General Counsel for Asbury Communities. And to explain more a little bit of the structure, Asbury Atlantic is part of a system that actually grew out of Asbury Methodist Village about 25 years ago when it was a standalone organization. And the board then, the independent board of directors, decided to create a parent organization called Asbury Communities for purposes of expanding the mission beyond just Gaithersburg, so the Asbury Solomons community. And it's grown from there. So there are several communities in Pennsylvania, some in Tennessee. And specifically, the question you have about Edge Therapy Solutions is an effort of ours to actually just diversify our revenue beyond just being a CCRC provider. So that's a therapy group that we started. It's a 100% owned ultimately by the not-for-profit parent. We have pharmacy services, home health, residential home services, and it's just an effort to expand the mission, further to serve the seniors in our communities and the surrounding areas.
Thank you. I'm not sure it answers my questions.
Okay.
It specifically says unrelated third party.
So the way we're set up, and I think Cheryl was alluding to it, is the entities, the legal entities, don't cross support each other necessarily. So it is related to the not-for-profit parent, but Asbury Atlantic, who's the borrower that we're talking about here, doesn't actually directly own Edge Therapy Solutions.
Okay. Okay, so that's how it's unrelated.
Yeah, that's
I got it.
sorry
Okay.
for the confusion.
Okay, thank
Good.
you.
Any other questions or comments before we go to the public?
Just, I don't know if we need to delve very deeply into this, Mr. Mayor, but we've issued bonds like these for the Asbury community in the past. I'm just wondering if anybody has a summary of sort of how recently or how often we've done it in the past, in the last,
Cheryl,
let's
do you
say,
wanna speak to
15 or
that?
20 years.
Let's say I could maybe. I mean, certainly, I do recall doing an issue back as far as 1987, so it does go quite far back. I think most recently we've done issues in 2018 and 2019. 2019, I believe, was the last.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is the time the mayor and council like to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on this topic. Excuse me. Same rules as with public comments. We ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And if you have additional, we'll take it in writing and we'll consider it just like oral testimony. State your name and address or neighborhood for the record. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak on this topic? Okay, let me just check on Zoom. I see one hand up on Zoom. So tech team, if you could bring up Susie Ward, that would be great. Susie, just the same as with your public comment testimony. Unmute yourself, state your name, address, and neighborhood. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Susie Ward. I live at 437 Gaither Street in Deer Park. I'm just trying to understand precisely how this works. So this, is it that the city will sell the bonds for Asbury, but yet Asbury is really the ones that will be paying them back? Am I understanding that correctly?
You are, but go ahead with your testimony.
I mean, it sounds like, as long as Asbury's already paid back the other times, sounds like a fine idea. I don't really know anything about it, so I'm just learning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else who'd like to testify on this topic? Going once, going twice. Okay. Yeah, Cheryl, do you want to give a quick overview of conduit bonds?
So as I indicated, it's a conduit bond. The city issues it in part, or the biggest reason is because It's a city obligation, it's a municipal obligation, it's going to be tax-exempt interest, and rather than a taxable loan that they could otherwise get at a bank. But the city issues the bond, they loan the proceeds to Asbury, and then Asbury pays back that loan. Now, those payments they do not flow through the city. We have a bond trustee. The payments go directly to the bond trustee, and then the bond trustee pays the bondholders. But it is solely from the Asbury loan payments where the bonds get paid back.
Fair enough. And I agree with Susie. It is, it's an unusual structure. State law puts this or allows this in order to benefit nonprofits that have partnerships with cities. Tanisha and I were just talking about this recently. So thank you for the question, and Chair, appreciate the explanation. So staff recommends that Mayor and Council hold their record open until April 1st, 2022, with anticipated policy discussion on April 4. What is the pleasure of the council?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, that carries 4-0. So if anybody wants to submit testimony, we will take it through April 1st. That concludes that public hearing. Now let us move to our next one. Let me just see who we're calling up here. Jasmine Forbes from our planning department.
Good evening. So this is a public hearing on concept site plan application SP-8819-2021. This application comes before the council as a public hearing in accordance with section 24-160G.6 of the city code. As shown on the screen, the subject properties are located at 601, 605, and 607 South Frederick Avenue and is Zone CD, Corridor Development Zone. The applicant's requesting concept site plan approval to construct a 5,617 square foot automatic car wash building and associated parking lot. The hearing was duly advertised on March 3rd and March 10th in the Washington Post and published on the city's website on March 1st. At the present time, there are 100 exhibits in the record files. There are referenced in the exhibit list in the files. Staff has received 2 outside correspondences after the meeting packet was posted, so those correspondences will be part of the policy discussion packet. The individual exhibits may be reviewed on the city website and at City Hall during regular hours. Any objection to the receipt of any exhibit should be noted prior to the closing of the record. Otherwise, they will be deemed received in evidence. And I will have Aaron Gerard from Miles and Stockbridge who will do the presentation this evening.
Welcome, Aaron.
Good evening. Happy to be here in person again. It's very refreshing. Aaron Gerard with Miles and Stockbridge on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight, I have Brett Schechter, who is on behalf of the applicant. We have Mike Klobasco, who is a wetlands expert, and one of his letters is in the record already. We have Nick Speech, who actually is joining us remotely. He is ill. But he's watching, and if anything comes up he needs to input on, we'll communicate appropriately through cell phones. And I have Nick driving here, who's with Lenhart Consulting, who is the traffic expert. So I just wanted you to know, should any questions arise, we have the full complement of consultants here. So this application has actually been pending before the city for almost a year, or almost exactly a year. After the original submittal, the applicant has worked very closely with staff to revise and improve the plan. Probably most notably, the original plan had a significant amount of encroachment in the stream valley buffer and wetlands buffer and floodplain for the property, which we'll go over in a minute. But they've spent a lot of time, and many thanks to staff who has worked very patiently to greatly improve the plan that you will see tonight. As Jasmine mentioned, it's 1.2 acres on South Frederick Avenue. It's currently improved with 2 single-family homes, and you can see those homes, and you can see the storage of vehicles and accessory buildings, particularly on 605 South Frederick Avenue. And in a minute, you're going to see where that stream valley buffer is. So currently, most of that buffer, which is on the eastern portion of the property, is lawn and storage areas for vehicles. The property was annexed into the city of Gaithersburg in 1989 and is subject to annexation agreement X150. Among other things, that annexation agreement requires that the parcels be accessed solely from Central Avenue. As was noted, it's Zone CD, corridor development, and it's subject to the Frederick Avenue Corridor Land Use Plan adopted in 2001. The property is abutted with commercial uses to the south, the Stream Valley Buffer to the east, single-family homes in the RA zone to the north, and the Gaithersburg Presbyterian Church, also in the RA zone, across South Frederick Avenue to the west. And you can just kind of see the outline of that building. As noted, the eastern one-third of the property is within Stream Valley Buffer. The next image shows it. So I apologize, the orientation of this is a little bit different, but north is generally to your left, South Frederick Avenue at the bottom of the screen. But you can start to see the eastern one-third of the property, or approximately one-third, has the lines delineating the Stream Valley Buffer, which creates the biggest buffer area on the property. What is being proposed is an express car wash. For those of you not familiar, it's different than a self-service and a full service. The express, whereas a full service can take about 20 or 30 minutes to get done, an express facility you drive through yourself and can get a complete wash dry cycle in 3 minutes, after which you can opt to use the vacuums or not. The site improvements that are proposed on this plan, and the same orientation as the last plan, all access is from Central Avenue, which is called for both in the sector plan and or the corridor plan and in the annexation agreement. So the access is on the north side of the property. Is this going to go? Yeah, okay. So if you want to walk with me through here, cars access and take a right, where they come into the stacking lanes for the property. We note that while the code would require 9 stacking spaces, 30 will be provided, as will be shown in a future exhibit, but I just don't want to have to flip back and forth. So this is the stacking area. They will go through a pay kiosk and take a left into the tunnel, passing through the tunnel. Once they emerge, they can make the decision to either take another left and exit back out onto Central Avenue, or take a right and go into the vacuum area. And as is noted in our statement that's included in the record, there will be in future stages of entitlement some waivers needed for those parking areas, most notably of which there's more space between the parking stalls, obviously, because they're used for vacuums and they're striped differently. We've requested a narrower drive aisle because along the eastern portion of the property where I'm moving the hand, that is going to be a retaining wall, and much thought was given to that retaining wall design. The footers are actually entirely on the western side of the property so that there's no Stream Valley Buffer encroachment. And you can see it comes very close to that line, but it does not cross over it, and that is very, very intentional. There are 23 parking spaces provided in total. The vacuums themselves, great care has been taken in their design to keep noise to a minimum. There's a central vacuum area, and in the vacuum spots, there's just handles that you can use. They don't have those big old canisters that make a lot of noise that a lot of people are familiar with. Similarly, the blowers in the tunnel are internal, and they're high-tech blowers that make a minimal amount of noise and are enclosed to further damper any noise impacts. The car wash itself would operate Monday through Saturday, 9 to 6, Saturday, 9 to 4. When it is closed, there are cones put at the entrance to prevent entry, and the vacuums are turned off completely so that no one can try to access the site to use them. At any one time, they anticipate 4 to 5 employees on the site, including a site manager, to make sure that noise is kept to a minimum, that there's no debris, nothing out of the ordinary is happening on the site. This image just gives you an idea of the stacking that I was talking about a minute ago. So on the environmental side, there was an intentional focus on the environment and the operations of the site. The project will recycle its water. It includes 3 reclaim recycle tanks and a grease interceptor. All soaps and cleaners used on the property will be safe and avoid harsh acids. Drainage from the parking area will all be directed to an underground storage facility for quantity and quality control, and there's a trench drain right at the entrance to collect any water that may be running off to ensure that no water escapes the property untreated. There's only 3 trees that are removed for removal, as part of this application. You can see them with the X's there. This one, the biggest one, is the only one that will require a tree variance. As you can see, its critical root zone takes up really the majority of the developable area of the site, assuming that you adhere to the stream valley buffer. So that the impacts of that tree are in fact unavoidable, and there's a tree variance letter in the record that explains that further. This is a conceptual landscape plan and obviously can be further revised as we get further in design, but you can see the appropriate buffering to the property to the south. There will be shrubbery and to make it as green as possible. And again, this is conceptual and will be refined further in the future. Included in the record is also an environmental standards waiver. As I mentioned, this has been reduced numerous times to try to get everything out of the stream valley buffer as possible. There used to be, in fact, a storm outfall that was in right around here. That has now been brought out to the street to avoid any impacts to the stream valley buffer. In this little bubbled area that you can see, that is proposed for reforestation. That will take that lawn area that I showed you a minute ago and turn it back into forest, which is a very positive thing for the environmental features to the east. In yellow is the only area of the stream valley buffer that will be impacted, and really that's only impacted for the very occasional maintenance of the retaining wall, and we are talking about people walking back there to try to do any handwork that they need to do. And on the south side, there's a little bit associated with the construction of that stormwater management facility. And as noted and I mentioned this a minute ago, but as noted in the February 6, 2022 letter from Wetland Studies and Solutions, Inc., the project will not have any adverse impacts on off-site wetlands and stream due to a number of features, including the reforestation of the lawn area, implementation of new stormwater management controls where none currently exist, topography and natural hydrology. Reviewing the building itself, and again, this is conceptual. This is the west elevation, so this is facing South Frederick Road. It's worth noting that the grade of the property is such that the building will set down from the road. It's actually going to be largely enclosed by retaining walls that are holding some of the grade. So it will sit down from the street. It is 1 story in height for the most part, but you can see some architectural features where it's 2 stories. The first floor is approximately 5,617 square feet, comprised of the tunnel, mechanical equipment, the cashier, office space, and a break room for the employees. This is the south elevation facing the commercial area to the south. You can see the tunnel on your right and the pay areas on your left. This is the area facing east, which is going to be into the stream valley buffer, and it would be where the view you would see from the vacuum area. And then this is the north view, so that's the exit to the tunnel on your left. There is a second floor, a very small second floor to the building, approximately 1,200 square feet, contains office space, a conference room, and storage area. Just quickly regarding master plan compliance, the property is within Area D of the Southern Residential District of the Corridor Plan, which recognizes the property's then current commercial office residential designation and recommends a zoning change for the property to CD. There was a recognition that this area is in transition and has already experienced some redevelopment to commercial uses, and it was recommended to permit more flexible development of these properties. The corridor plan further recognizes that these lots are small inside, should be consolidated and use a shared common driveway with ingress-egress from Central Avenue to help reduce the curb cuts on Frederick Avenue. It does also call for a maximum of 7,000 square feet of building on the lot, and this is well below that. And all of this is detailed, again, in our statement that's included in the record, so I won't go into every detail of it. I did want to note there has been a number of letters submitted in opposition to the use. It is worth noting that one of the most vocal opponents is a car wash operator in the vicinity who obviously has some competitive concerns in addition to the concerns they raise in the submissions. There's a number of traffic critiques. As noted, Lenhart Traffic Consultants, a very well-respected firm, has been engaged by the applicant and has already submitted quite detailed information at the concept plan stage. There's actually no requirement to evaluate traffic in any meaningful way, but there has been the start of that, and we're confident that there's not going to be any traffic concerns. And we will be submitting formal responses to all the opposition arguments that have been collected so far and will be submitted tonight more formally for your review in the record. So that, I think, is it. Yes. So again, we're happy to address any issues or answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Just appreciate the presentation. Just to clarify that the last later comment about traffic study, for the public viewing, traffic study will be part of the next phase. It's just not it's not required with a concept plan. It's when we get to schematic development plan stage. Just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. So our colleague Rob Wu, who's not here tonight, is watching on Zoom, and he texted me a question he wanted asked, and I'm going to ask that question first. He says, are the stated hours of operation notional, or are they offered as a condition of approval?
We're fine with the condition, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Just didn't want to speak out of turn. Yes, we would agree to them as conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you. With that, any questions or comments before we go to the public? Ryan?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to follow up on something you said, which followed up in turn on what something Aaron said, is the process here is a little bit different than some of our other zones. Maybe Jasmine can just sort of like quickly summarize what happens next, because we're not at a joint hearing, we don't have the Planning Commission with us. This is the CD zone, this is a concept site plan only, but the applicant has provided more information than they might otherwise be required to. So just to clarify for the public, what comes next in terms of the consideration process after this public hearing, and what other opportunities for public input might there be down the road?
Okay, so as I say, this is a concept site plan. So at this stage, the applicant will just provide conceptual, like building footprints, conceptual architecture. At this stage, traffic impact studies will not be provided. After this public hearing, of course, we'll have a record open for if someone's provide additional testimony, and then there'll be a policy discussion. However the policy discussion comes out, the concept site plan gets approved, either it'll come back as a schematic development plan, be reviewed by the Mayor, City Council, and the Planning Commission, or it can go to preliminary and final to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So it kind of determines what happens after policy discussion and what the council decides.
But in either of those subsequent alternatives, if we're assuming hypothetically for the moment, if the concept plan gets approved after the public record is closed, there will be additional opportunities for public input at those subsequent processes.
Yep, that's correct.
Neil?
So I have questions on a few of the points that were brought up just now. I guess I'll start from the last one that I wrote down, which is this plan would require a zoning change from residential to CD. Is that not correct?
No, the property's already zoned CD.
It's already zoned, has
so there's
already
no
been zoned.
rezoning part of this application.
Okay.
The reference was to the sector or the corridor plan. The corridor plan did recommend the rezoning, but that's already occurred.
Okay, thank you. There was a comment made that no untreated water will leave the property. Is there treated water that will be going into public sewer systems or something along those lines?
I believe it will all be, and I'll have to grab my phone for Nick to text me on this one. But I believe it's all captured on site and treated before it's released. At some point it will be released, but it will be either recycled on site or it will be released after treatment.
Okay.
We'll have, since the engineer's not here this evening, we'll have that part of hit the response letter for more details about how the water is recycled.
Okay.
Yeah, come on up to the mic.
Good evening. My name is Brett Schechter from Whip Clean Car Wash, and I just wanted to share, as far as my understanding, the storm water is to be collected in the underground tanks, and then it is filtered before it is discharged. So not talking about any car wash water, just speaking about storm water. There is a slide that shows the proposed underground tanks, and they are equipped with filters before the water is discharged.
Okay.
Did I go past?
And I think it may be a related question, so don't go far.
Okay.
There's a requirement for an environmental standards waiver. What does that constitute? What is the necessity for that waiver?
I can address that.
Please.
Sure, and that's the environmental standards waiver, and there's an entirely separate, I don't have the exhibit number, there's an entirely separate submittal besides the statement of justification that deals with the environmental standards waiver. So generally, you're not to disturb stream valley buffers, floodplains, wetlands, and if you are, you need to justify it, meet certain criteria, which we go through in that standard, or that standard waiver request. And as I was saying, what used to be a much larger area is now condensed to just the 1,232 square feet that you see that's yellow. And the extent of that is just for the installation of that one stormwater management facility on the south side, and then for periodic maintenance of the wall. We did have some discussions with staff, because our position originally was we're going to install the wall and then we're not going to need to get on that side. But staff's position was if you need people to walk through there, it can't be regrown to full forest. So therefore, that was kind of the genesis of needing the waiver. In exchange for that waiver, we've offered to reforest the 0.26 acres that you see in the bubbles on the plan. That's basically the area between the stream valley buffer and the stream.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate companies wanting to reinvest in Old Town. I think that's important. One of the questions I had, and it's going to be something I think we need to see in site plan, I appreciate the additional work that's been done as far as looking at traffic and understanding how things will queue to start alleviating some of those concerns. My questions are more, and you're not going to be able to answer this tonight, but my questions are more on the egress and thinking about how cars are going to be coming out of it, and knowing, driving that road very often, and knowing the amount of time it takes for that light to change. And if people are trying to come through, the automatic pushing of the car through the wash, how many cars are you going to be able to fit if you're backing up trying to make that left turn if there's traffic coming down Chestnut? So I think that's going to be something that you'll need to address in the future. I also think it's going to be important to understand, as you mentioned, because you need a level facility, I imagine that you're going to have a good portion of it below grade. I think it's going to be important to capture that in your drawings, to be able to show how that's going to be dropped down with the retaining walls, so we can understand what it would look like from Frederick Avenue from Central. Sure. Just going through my notes, I apologize. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification to make
Sure.
sure I'm understanding correctly? So is your concern this movement, cars coming out of the tunnel, trying to access on
What
exit on
page are you on? I'm sorry.
Tech
Oh,
team,
I'm
could you bring
sorry.
up the slide? Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
like, oh, you're not seeing what I'm seeing.
Thank you. Yes, so coming out from there.
Coming
and then
out
you-
from here and trying to make exit onto Central, you're worried about the stacking here?
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll be able to address that.
So if there's a traffic jam at that spot, will the conveyor that moves people through the tunnel stop at that point?
I believe there's an emergency button, right?
You want to pull up the slide again. At the end of the tunnel, there's a sensor that basically, if a car is sitting over top of it, the conveyor stops.
Okay.
So it's not until there is a car length past that the conveyor starts up again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lisa?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and all the details, the thorough details that you provided was very informative. I'm going to hold my comments. I know that staff hasn't finished their analysis, so I'm going to hold comments. I do have a concern about the number of waivers that are being requested, but the full story isn't in yet. So I'll hold comment.
Okay.
Okay. All right, well then we will open this up for public comment. Same rules. This is the time the Mayor and Council wants to hear from anybody who'd like to speak on this topic. Same rules as for the public comments and for the previous public hearing. We'll need you to state your name, address, or neighborhood. Keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. Is there anybody in the room who'd like to speak tonight? Please, come on up. If the next speaker just wants to line up behind this one, that would be great. Just line up if you want to speak.
Good evening, Mayor Ashman and members of council. I'm David Brown of the law firm Knauf & Brown in Rockville, representing about 20 or so residents nearby along Central Avenue and Poplar, which is the next street up, who would be impacted by this development that's before you tonight. Let me quickly try to squeeze in 4 reasons why this concept plan should not be approved. First, it's inconsistent with the annexation agreement. This property came into the city via annexation agreement X-150 in December 1989. That agreement specified, quote, redevelopment should have a residential character. And the annexation agreement appropriately placed the property in the CB zone, not the CD zone. A car wash is not included among the permitted uses in the CB zone. Plan approval would thus be contrary to the express terms of the agreement. The argument that there's no problem because the property's been rezoned to allow for a car wash in the CD zone does not change the reality that redevelopment of the property would be at odds with the annexation agreement. As I read sections 9, 196.1, and 244 of the zoning ordinance, when a property is first redeveloped, as here, following annexation, the agreement should be honored, not violated. Second point, master plan inconsistency. The concept plan should also not be approved for lack of consistency with the 2001 Frederick Avenue Corridor Land Use Plan. For this specific location, the plan specifically calls for uses such as, and I'm quoting again, offices, light retail, or live-work units in low-rise buildings. The car wash clearly is a much more intense use than anything that can be described as light retail. The property has not undergone redevelopment since these 2 events in the official city action. This area is a transition zone to less intensely developed residential properties to the north and east. Consistent with the plan, for example, the existing residential structures on this property could be redeveloped not as residences, but as residential appearing commercial professional offices. Point number 3, environmental standards waiver request is not justified. Much of the property is environmentally sensitive and protected by environmental buffers. The applicant wants a waiver to encroach on 3 of them: wetland, stream valley, and floodplain. To justify any waiver, the applicant must demonstrate what in legal terms is called unnecessary or undue hardship. No such hardship has been shown. First, there are many CD zone permitted uses that could be established here without any buffer encroachment. Second, the applicant is not the property owner, just a contingent purchaser. So even if denial of the waiver meant demise of the project, that would be no meaningful hardship to the applicant. My last point is about the adequacy of transportation facilities, and I'll try to address Commissioner McNulty's point.
You're out of time, so we're going to ask that you submit the rest in writing because we have a number of people.
Okay, it's simply addressing the problem of congestion at that particular intersection that you were talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Robert Durst. I lived over at 21 DeSalem Avenue for over 15 years. And I've worked, managed, built car washes for over the last 30 years. It's a beautiful car wash, but the numbers don't work. First, he wants to get a waiver on his parking in the vacuum area. 80% of his customers are going to want to go over to the free vacuums. There's 16 slots, and he's going to be putting approximately 120 cars an hour out of this car wash. So half of them don't get to vacuum their car. Or they pull up and stop at the end of the tunnel, and everything stops. The 10 to 15, or of the 100 and, well, if he's averaging 100 cars an hour, 80% gives him about 40 cars, 60 cars going over to the self-serve. which means they're going to be there for 10 to 15 minutes. So that customer is not there for a full cycle of 3 minutes. This customer's there for 18 to 25 minutes. And some will try to homestead. So instead of having a stacking area of 9 or needing a stacking area of 9, he's up to close to 60, and he's showing 31. Let me go. The project looks great. It's just in the wrong place. Having cars pull out and going through a neighborhood, or being able to pull 6 cars out and having to stop because you can't get on to 355 off of Central Avenue unless the light changes. And part of the lunchtime rush hour, West Deer Park backs all the way up past Central Avenue, and you may not get anything out. I've been over to his car wash over in Boyd, and it's a nice location. Watched it be built, got in line, and spent 25 minutes to get through the car wash, not 3. It's not just, car wash is good for Gaithersburg, but it's in the wrong place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rudy Porter. I live at 204 Central Avenue. My wife and I are doing our best to raise a 12-year-old daughter on Central Avenue. I have 2 main concerns. The first is traffic. Central Avenue is already a dangerous street. In the last 6 years that I've personally seen, 10 cars totaled, overturned, or off the road into the ditch. There's been numerous accidents in addition to those 10 cars. People ignore the speed limit. There's speed bumps, but people ignore it. We're now talking about adding essentially 100 cars per hour to that street. That makes the street I'm trying to live on more dangerous than it already is. I'd like to point out there is no light at the corner of Central Avenue and 355. There's a no left turn sign, so anyone coming from the south that enters the car wash that wants to go back south must drive through our neighborhood. About 85 homes in this nice neighborhood. This is my second concern. There's really 3 entrances to our neighborhood. One comes off Oakmont Avenue. That entrance has a dump truck lot. The other comes over the Humpback Bridge. The last place there is a rusted out container yard. You're now asked to consider putting a car wash at the 3rd entrance to our neighborhood, the last entrance that our neighborhood has, any respectful place. And
You have a minute.
1 minute.
Yeah.
In that minute, I'd like to say I talked to the gentleman from the car wash. I was encouraged to go to Bowie to see this nice facility. I did that on my own time, drove the 45 minutes to Bowie. And the building is fairly nice. But what they didn't say is that there's the vacuum facility. This is what the vacuum facility looks like. It's a monstrosity. And I would have to say that when I walked around the vacuum facility, there was garbage from the cars laying on the ground. So people are pulling their car up, opening it up, and some of the garbage is going on the ground. And I noticed that the vacuum facility wasn't in any of the illustrations of the building. So I encourage you to turn this down. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Danny Trupis. I'm with Long and Foster Real Estate. I represent Tomasian family who owns 4 Central Court, which is right off Central Avenue, which is about 60 feet away from this car wash. They have had plans approved to build 3 lots there. Unfortunately, my client is very disturbed because he feels it's going to impact the value of his property and the development of that property, whoever wants to buy it. As of last week, I've had 27 people call me about the property, but not for housing. They want medical offices, they want school, they want a school there. Every single one of those. I tell them to go to the city, ask them if they can rezone it, and they come back to me, and half of them have come back to me and said they discouraged us from trying to get it rezoned. My client's worried about noise. No matter what they tell you, those vacuums do make noise, okay? To be upfront with you, I also represent WLL Properties. You may have heard of their franchise, which is called Lube Centers. He has these types of car washes, plus he has spas. I asked him, I said, Randy, would you put a car wash right next to a residential property? He said, absolutely not. Why would I do that? I just make people mad at me from the neighborhood that I want to get business from. I don't understand why we can't get this our property at 4 Central Court rezoned, or what the process is in the city of Gaithersburg. So I've never done that. I've been a resident actually of Gaithersburg. I've actually been 5 years on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce, and that was back in the mid to late 70s. And it's always been a very progressive city. They always want to do the best for everybody. I understand that. But this is the wrong business in the wrong place. I'm telling you right now. I've done commercial real estate for 18 years, and this is not it. I also read about this annexation agreement, and I got this from a friend of mine at the county. And it specifically says a car wash is not included among the permitted uses in that zone. Are you going to fight the county because you violated this? It's up to you. Think about it. Take it.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is George Kreutz, and I heard about this going on. I use that street all the time to pass.
George, can you state either your address or your neighborhood,
Oh, it's
please?
635 Hurdle Mill. So
Thank
it's
you.
kind of more towards Old Town.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty much, I turning onto that road, it's already a pain as it is. Things get backed up. There's a bus lane there. I use that road almost every day. I just don't see, putting a car wash right on that, excuse me, right on that corner. It's just going to get backed up. I make a right out of there to head, towards Gaithersburg every day, and it's just going to be, it's going to take a long time to get to work. So I just hope there's something you guys see. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other testimonies in here for people present before I go to look at Zoom? Going once, going twice? Okay. Let me just take a look and see. We have a few hands raised on Zoom. I can't, when staff hovers over it with the, yeah, thank you, because I can't read it. Staff, you can bring up Kadir Soharwardi, and forgive me if I didn't get that name right. Please correct me. Just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead. Kadir, you have to unmute yourself. Are you with us, Kadir? Okay. Let's put that one on hold. We'll go to the next speaker, Catherine George. Catherine, if you can just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go right ahead. Catherine, are you with us? I am not hearing.
Hello?
Yes, okay, I hear you now. Go right ahead.
Oh, very good. Very good. My name's Catherine George. I'm at 16625 Alden Avenue in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is the Rosemont neighborhood. It's near Walnut Hill. And this is a simple question. People spoke quite quickly. What are the proposed hours? You said Monday through Saturday, 9 to 6, and then something about Saturday was 9 to 4, and then Sunday you're closed, or what are the correct hours there?
Okay, is that, Catherine, is that?
That's it, and I think somebody could just answer me, please.
Yeah, we'll get you an answer. Thank you very much. I'm gonna wait till after the testimonies. I'll have Aaron answer some questions for us.
Very good.
Okay, tech team, if we could bring up Donna Roa, that would be great. Donna, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, go right ahead.
Hello, Donna Vincent Roa. I am a Gaithersburg resident. I live on Poplarwood Place, right behind the property where the car wash is proposed to be set up. Tonight I'm speaking against the car wash on Frederick Avenue. We are residents and we have to live with a decision like this, and it's important for us to talk about the impacts of this business being in our neighborhood. I'll start first with the issue of traffic. I drive Central Avenue onto Frederick Avenue every single day, and sometimes it takes me 4 to 6 minutes to turn right to be able to get out of the neighborhood. If you could imagine what would be necessary for me to do to get out of the neighborhood would be to turn right, go all the way back to Oakmont, come up off to Shady Grove. So just the idea of traffic will create multiple complications. I walk in the area all the time with my dog. I look at the stream in the area. I look at currently just the trash in the area in general for people throwing things into the woods. And now we're going to build a car wash. Do we need a car wash? There are 5 other car washes in the area. This organization is asking for an environmental waiver. Who else is going to ask for a waiver? We need to save the environment. There's going to be water pollution, light pollution, noise pollution, traffic congestion, as I've already mentioned. In addition to that, a drop in property values. And don't forget about the danger to wildlife. Foxes, deers, the system will drive away birds. It will disturb the delicate ecosystem that we have, and it will also affect our sustainable water future. I believe that the car wash activities are a great concern to the environment. How water is being cleaned and managed is also important, and this will definitely decrease our property values. We are interested in being viable neighbors in this area, and we're very concerned that this business is going to happen and is going to degrade the entire area. This is Gaithersburg. We don't need another business sitting at the edge of our neighborhood. I was walking the other day with my dog near the Exxon car wash, a smaller car wash, and as I was walking in a new area coming up behind the car wash, I was saying, what is this noise? What is this noise? Only to realize it was a small car wash emanating this loud sound. And we're going to have a larger car wash with expanded noise in this area. It's harmful to us, and we will have no choice after this kind of business is put in place. We will have to deal with the pollution. We'll have to deal with the sound. Thank you for the time today, and I would vote vehemently against putting this kind of business in this neighborhood. Let's do something better, council. Thank you.
Thank you. Tech team, if you could bring up Marvin Posada, that would be great. Marvin, just unmute yourself, state your name, address or neighborhood, and go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Marvin Posada, and me and my family reside at 433 Muddy Branch Road. And it seems like our concern also aligns with the chairman's and other people of this community regarding the traffic congestion that might occur. And we just feel like after hearing it might be an afterthought. I think that should be one of the priorities of this council and make sure the community has a safe road to actually travel against. And I think that's our biggest concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tech team, if you could bring up Gus Stefano, that would be great. Gus, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go right ahead. Gus, you have to unmute. Are you with us, Gus? Okay, maybe not. Let's go back to Susie Ward then, tech team. Susie, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go ahead.
Hi, I'm Susie Ward, 437 Gaither Street in Deer Park. I just want to second what a lot of these folks have said. Environmentally, it's going to pollute air, light, water, noise. It's going to disturb the wildlife, as the other speaker said. And everyone has said that intersection at Central Avenue and 355 is very dangerous. I've seen accidents there. There's a no left turn sign because it's too dangerous to turn left. But sometimes people still do it. And traffic, as they say, is already backed up. It already backs up. It's just going to get worse. There's no way bringing all that extra traffic in is going to help anything. The other thing, I mean, there are other businesses that could go into these three little lots. And whether it's doctor's offices or lawyers or I don't know, but there are things we could do with those lots that would be much more in keeping with the surrounds. I mean, personally, I go to Gaithersburg Presbyterian Church. I'm not too anxious to have a car wash across the street. Plus, there's a sign on the overpass as you come north from Shady Grove Road. It says, "Welcome to Gaithersburg." Is this what we want Gaithersburg to look like? Strip mall kind of with car washes? And I don't know, that's not very welcoming. I think we can do better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tech team, it looks like Gus has raised his hand again. Let's try Gus again. Gus, can you unmute and then state your name, address, or neighborhood, and go ahead?
Gus Stefano, 401 South Frederick Avenue, Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
I don't understand what the purpose of having this 355 look like car wash alley. You already have a lot of washes in the area. For God's sakes, I can't understand how this project even got this far. You got a creek behind there. You got all this runoff. The traffic situation that all the local citizens are clamoring about. It's unfathomable to me that you're even having this meeting. So I'm very much against this. I've been a resident of Gaithersburg and a property owner, business owner, close to 4 years. And I've owned a car wash. I used to own a car wash on Shady Grove Road. I know very well how these washes operate. They don't really generate a whole lot of local activity in terms of qualified employment and opportunity. It's going to be a disaster environmentally and economically to the citizens surrounding that facility. So I think it really should be reconsidered. I can't understand how it got to this point. That's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Do we have anybody else on Zoom who'd like to testify? So use the Zoom raise hand function. Going once, going twice. Okay. So first thing, I just want to make one response to the last comment, which was essentially how could we allow it to get to this? Excuse me. Appreciate it. We're having a meeting. If you got any private conversations, please have them outside the room. How could we have let it get to this point? We are city government, and if somebody applies, a private property owner submits an application for our consideration, we are legally required to consider it, and that is what we are currently doing. So I wanted to answer that particular question. The second one I wanted to put Lynn on the spot here as our city attorney. There have been a couple of comments about an old annexation agreement for this property. How would you respond to those comments?
Well, certainly I think it's something that we need to look into. So before we get to policy discussion, we'll review the annexation agreement as well as the master plan requirements as applicable to this particular property.
Thank you. And then Aaron, I wanted to give you a chance to, number one, talk about there was a question about what the hours of operation are, and two, I want to give you a chance to respond to anything else you'd like to respond to.
Sure, thank you very much. The hours of operation, as I'd stated earlier, and as we'd agreed to, could be a condition of approval, Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sunday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And as I'd noted, then vacuums will be turned off and cones will block the entrance when not in operation. As I said, I don't want to go through every, and I'm sure you probably don't want me to go through point by point tonight. We will submit a comprehensive response, but I just would note, while I understand perfectly that there are residential areas to the east, this is along South Frederick Avenue. It is within the Frederick Avenue corridor. It was recommended in the corridor plan to be rezoned to this zone, which does allow car wash uses. So the request is in compliance with the zoning. We're not requesting a rezoning to allow for a use. And as I think we've demonstrated in the materials we've submitted, we do conform to the standards for that use. And so I understand, again, I knew traffic would be an issue. We have an expert on board who obviously will analyze that and has analyzed that. There's already material in the record, but that will be further evaluated, and things that were raised like the egress stacking, certainly we can provide details on that, and anything else that people need to see. But this is not being taken lightly. As far as the environmental concerns are, there is an encroachment, but it is very minimal in our view. And there is a spectacular trade-off, I believe, of all that area being reforested. As it was noted, it was suggested that maybe the existing residence could be repurposed. And as you saw in the aerial, there's a lot of outbuildings and storage of vehicles out there. People noted there's trash. I mean, this will certainly clean up that area, reforest it, and will separate the proposed use from that environmentally sensitive area with a retaining wall. So there will actually be a divider that's not there now. So those are just kind of high point thoughts, and we'll address other issues more comprehensively in writing.
Okay. Jim?
And Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to confirm, because I think the applicant corrected your earlier statement with regard to the hours, because originally I heard that Sunday was not going to have hours, and I think that's why Rob Wu chimed in asking if that was something that should be a condition, that it was going to be closed on Sunday. So what we just heard is that it will be open 7 days a week.
I apologize if I misspoke.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying. Any other comments before we go to the record closing? Okay.
May I just mention something?
Well, come to the microphone, please.
It's Brett Schechter again, and I just wanted to make a note that I have an email from Jasmine dated March 9th, 2020. After our meeting on Tuesday, I checked with our city attorney about the language in the annexation agreement. He does agree with staff that the property may be developed with uses allowed in the CB zone, but is not restricted to those uses in the CB zone, and is allowed uses by right in the CD zone. If you have any additional questions, please let me know.
Thank you. And we'll get more clarification on that before we get to a vote on this. Staff recommends that the mayor and council hold our record open until 5 p.m. on April 27th with anticipated policy discussion on May 16th. What is the pleasure of the council?
So, second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, that carries 4-0. So for anybody here who has additional testimony, or anybody watching, or any interested parties, we will be accepting testimony. We'll consider it just like oral testimony before. If it's received before April 27th, the email to get to us is cityhall@gaithersburgmd.gov. And that'll all be on our website as well. So we look forward to hearing from all interested parties, and we will move on to our next public hearing, which is on our budget, and this discussion is going to be led by our city manager, Tanisha Briley, and our budget manager, Nathan Bassett. And see, we have some transition. We thank you all for coming and being with us for the public hearing.
Good to meet you.
Beg your pardon?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm pleased to present a brief summary of the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. The purpose of tonight's overview is to provide some general context for the proposed budget, as all of you, along with the community, review the budget in detail and formulate your feedback or questions. We will go into more detail at next week's budget workshop. As a reminder, the proposed budget is available on the city's website, and you all should have received an electronic version for your review on March 18th. With me this evening is Budget Manager Nathan Bassett, and Nate will assist with tonight's brief overview, and we are both here along with Acting Director Janice Hartman and the senior leadership team to address any questions you have. So just quickly, what we're going to cover, a quick process review. Nate will lead that portion, and then we'll dive into some summarized information on the introduced budget versus what we're presenting tonight, the proposed revenues and expenses, a brief CIP overview, and stormwater summary, and then we'll talk about next steps. Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This year, the budget process and timing changed to accommodate incorporation of some best practices and to better meet the county's deadline for submission of tax rates for tax billing purposes. I'm going to focus on the first two boxes, so September to January and February to March, as these are where a majority of the process changes took place. The budget kickoff was held in mid-September, marking the opening of the FY23 budget season with departmental budget preparation and work on the capital improvement plan. This is about a month earlier than in prior years. Departments were provided a base budget, which I'll delve into more on the next slide, at the time that the budget software opened in mid-September. Finance provided a rolling deadline for adjustments to the base budget with an initial deadline at the end of September. And in that same time period, the city held a kickoff for the strategic plan refresh with the mayor and city council retreat, and the budget survey also opened for a 4-week period during that time. CIP deadlines fell in October for new projects and November for updates to existing projects. Operating changes, including changes to fees, revenues, expense updates, and any budget enhancements, were due in late November, and meetings with departmental staff on the strategic plan update occurred in mid-December. By December, staff are conducting analysis and reviewing the budget submissions, with departmental budget review meetings held during 2 weeks in January. For comparison, in prior years, these meetings would be held in February. After these meetings, finance staff worked with the city manager's office to model several budget options and develop the budget ordinance for introduction in late February. The city manager's proposed budget was published last Friday, and the budget, all things considered, will be adopted hopefully on May 16th with an effective date of July 1st. The adoption date is also earlier to help comply with the county's deadlines. Next slide. Perfect. There were a number of major changes this year to the budget, which include all of the following items. We instituted a base budget where finance staff provide a preliminary budget based upon assumptions around personnel and healthcare costs, removing one-time expenditures from the prior year, and making changes to budgets based on personnel changes that have occurred. These are all intended to provide a best initial estimate of the cost of current service levels. Departments were asked to request any contractual funding changes or updates needed to maintain their current service levels as well, and these items were initially due at the end of September, but changes occurred throughout the process. For the CIP process, a new CIP evaluation committee was established to score the various proposals received across 12 metrics, including relationship to priorities, preservation of public safety and health, and equity considerations. The scores were used to determine which projects would be undertaken, with the new projects listed in the CIP having gone through the process this year. Finance also introduced a budget enhancement process for departments to request additions to current service levels, including new positions, programs, software, and capital items. Incorporating this process allows staff to separate out new spending from spending for current service levels, as well as focusing more deeply on the purpose and scope of new spending. With the implementation of this new process, over 50 items were submitted for evaluation. Lastly, finance met with departments prior to meeting with the city manager's office
to refine and provide an initial valuation of their requests. This reduces the amount of time needed with the city manager's office and provides better quality information for decision making. It's kind of everything that we updated this year, and this is all in line with like GFOA best practices.
Thanks, Nate. So the city's accounts are organized into funds or separate pools of money dedicated to a specific purpose. The city currently has 6 funds, though you just approved another one recently, so we'll have 7. But 6 are shown here, and the total, all funds proposed FY23 budget is $98.6 million. So tonight we're going to focus our attention on 3 funds, the 2 major operating funds, which is the general fund and the stormwater fund, and the capital improvements fund. These 3 combined cover about $93 million of the $98.6 million. So again, complete details can be found in the proposed budget book for those who want to drill down into the data. And I want to mention that the proposed budget contains no tax rate increase, is aligned with community input we've received through the budget survey, as well as the city's priorities. The city is currently engaged in an intensive review of the strategic plan, as Nate mentioned, and that will solidify our priorities for the next 5 years. We fully expect the new plan to be ready in May and reflected in the budget. So we'll start tonight with the general fund, the city's main operating fund. So before you is the slide of the introduced budget. So this is what was in the ordinance that was presented and approved for introduction at the February 22nd, 2022 Mayor and City Council meeting. These numbers reflect the amounts that were included in introduction, as I said. As is the case with every budget process, and as Nate explained, as we receive additional information, we are able to refine the budget numbers as we go along. As numbers change, we will always provide an accounting of the changes and why they were made. It's a wonderful, wonderful service that Nate provides for us, tracking those changes. And we will continue to communicate those changes until the final adoption of the budget in May. So the proposed budget is $72.4 million for the general fund. This represents just a 3.2% increase over the current year's budget. We are proposing to budget the use of about $604,000 in reappropriated reserve funds to cover planned one-time capital projects and contingency funding. This budget marks the 2nd year of eliminating the use of fund balance to fund operational expenses. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to throw us curveballs, of course, and creating this sustained financial uncertainty in which impacts our approach to the budgeting process. The year-over-year increase of 3.2% reflects our continued conservative budgeting approach and allows us some flexibility to adjust when economic conditions change. So this slide is showing the difference between the introduced versus the proposed budget, with the far column, the difference column, showing you the difference. So the vast majority of the $174,000 reduction can be attributed to the reduced amount of the transfer to the OPEB fund, or other post-employment retirement benefits fund, which we discussed recently with the mayor and council. The city worked with our actuarial consultant to analyze our funding levels in this fund and help us design a funding strategy that would meet our funding goals to ensure these promised benefits are available to city retirees in the future. With consultation from the mayor and council following review of the study's results, we've determined that the appropriate funding level was to reach and maintain 90% funded over a 20-year span. That lowered our planned contribution for next year. And just to cheat a little bit, we thought it might go down. So you can see in the introduced budget, we had $2 million versus the 3.4 that we had planned for this current fiscal year. So we were expecting a drop, and after the review, we were able to refine that number even further. Going forward, the transfer to the OPEB fund will be increased by 3% each year, and the funding level will be reviewed every other year to be sure that we're on track to maintain our goal. The other major anticipated change was an increase in fuel costs. I don't have to explain that further. I think everybody's feeling and seeing that today. And of course, our city fleet will experience those increases as well. We've made some recent adjustments to the contract that you approved, and we expect that to continue into the next fiscal year. So there were some adjustments made there. That's the vast majority of the increase you see at the operating budget line across the top. But there are other smaller changes throughout all of the departments, plus 10 here, minus 20 there, that sort of add up to the 180. So overall, between introduced and proposed, the budget was reduced $173,554. So very quickly, our revenues, we're going to really drill down into some of our major revenue sources next week during our budget workshop. This chart illustrates the breakdown that we're projecting in the proposed budget. These percentages closely track the trends that we see in our major revenue sources, with real estate taxes and income taxes making up the vast majority of revenue at 48 and 26%. Again, next week we'll bring your pencils and hopefully not a sleeping bag, because we plan to go into some really good detail there and talk about some of the trends we're seeing and some good news and recovery that we're seeing with respect to the pandemic. So we're looking forward to that. On the expense side, as expected, the majority of our expenses, 61%, are spent on people. And so personnel services at 61%. That's normal and expected. Our third largest expense category I want to draw your attention to quickly is our transfers at 15%. It's important to note that while the city has 6 different funds, as was mentioned a few slides ago, most of them receive their revenue from the general fund. And they don't have separate sources of recurring revenue. So they are indeed supported by the general fund. So we will talk quickly about transfers tonight, and of course in much more detail next week. This slide is showing expenses by department. I want to highlight that the second largest department is not a department at all, which is non-departmental at 20%. It's a close second to Public Works at 23%. The non-departmental department is shown separately here because that is where we make the transfers. So the transfers are budgeted there, so there's 20%. And then we also have other citywide expenses that really don't align with one particular department, so they also are budgeted there. We talked about this department separately last year, but in the past it's always shown up as a part of finance. It makes sense to pull it out and show you this information this way. So one, you can see the true cost of the finance department, and then we can separate out the non-departmental. So that's how it's reflected now in the budget book going forward. Okay, briefly on the transfers, you see the OPEB trust transfer amount there that we've discussed. The other funds which receive a transfer from the general fund include stormwater, asset replacement, the capital fund, and the housing fund. As a debt-free city, we pay for large capital projects by accumulating monies over time. We do so in the capital fund. And the CIP also has annual projects, such as our annual street maintenance program and others, which these transfers cover as well. So in this budget year and going forward, we plan to treat those annual as they're not operating expenses because they show up in the capital fund. But when I talk about having a balanced budget, we need to also make sure we're thinking about those annual expenses that we have in our capital fund as well. To sort of prove our structural balance, right? So just to give you some insight on how we'll continue to strive for balance each year. Okay. What happened?
It didn't go. There you go.
There we go. All right, so just a quick summary. These are not all the significant changes. Obviously, there are tons of them in the budget, and we will cover the main highlights with you next week. But I just wanted to review some of the bigger ones. As I mentioned, the FY23 budget is increasing by 3.2% over the current year's budget. We cover more detail, obviously, with the departments next week, but this increase is driven by investment in our people, including 6 new and 3 reclassified positions to expand capacity, a 4% general wage increase, adjustments to minimum wage, expanded professional development opportunities, including increased tuition reimbursement, along with special projects to enhance service like the website refresh project, a comprehensive review of the zoning code, which I'm sure we're all very excited about. We'll also be undertaking an analysis of our comprehensive capital needs and exploring corresponding funding models so that we can bring that back, hopefully in time for the FY24 budget. We're also focused on restoring service levels and programs. So we are moving into our living with COVID mode, and we've obviously not been at full capacity in a lot of our parks and recreation programming, for example, other kinds of events and programs. And so the FY23 budget shows a restoration of those programs, which also increases the costs, the corresponding costs, and hopefully the corresponding revenue. Right? Yes. Finally, the budget includes more support for our nonprofit partners who've been invaluable allies as we support those in our community who are most in need. All right, we'll quickly cover the CIP, $15.8 million for this next year. You will hear a lot from Dennis next week as we dive into the detail of the CIP. Essentially, high level, we've got 6 new and 1 consolidated CIP project. The 6 new projects are the $3 million, and we'll talk about that shortly. The consolidated project, we took several streets maintenance projects that were separate in the CIP and combined them into one, which will now be known as the Annual Surface Improvement Program. So a huge chunk of that $15 million is that consolidation, if you see that the rest of the money is $3 million. So the 6 new projects represent about $3 million of the total proposed CIP and include some alley work and other improvements on Churchgate Lane, which will help improve our turning radii. And why that's important is there's a lot of damage that happens in that very tight area for recycling and trash trucks, and this will help us avoid that in the future. I think Public Works staff is extremely happy about that project. It's not the most exciting on paper, but we're pumped about it. We will also be upgrading the KC Dance Studio floor and beginning a redesign process for Robertson Park. Other projects include the installation of a new futsal court, which I learned all about futsal through this budget process, at Morris Park, and lighting at the new Kelly Park turf field. Again, Dennis will jump into a lot of detail on these projects and more next week. And last but not least, the Stormwater Fund. This is representing the operating budget in the Stormwater Fund of $5.1 million. There's about a little over $2 million in larger scale capital improvements that's also included in the CIP. So this slide just shows a breakdown of the operating costs for the Stormwater Fund. The largest shifts in this fund for next year's budget will be the transfers. So just as a reminder, last year, following a study of the city's stormwater management needs and the rate, we determined we were able to leave the rate flat and also repay the general fund and the CIP fund for their initial one-time outlays to establish the stormwater fund when it was initially created. That was a little over $7 million that was repaid to those funds and showed up in that transfer line. So that amount is now much smaller than it was last year since that money has been repaid. The 5.1 proposed budget for next year includes funding for a new project manager position, a new educational campaign for projects like stream restoration, and additional maintenance projects, which will be covered next week. And the Stormwater Fund also covers its share of expenses that occur in the general fund, which is reflected in the transfer amount. Since I mentioned the chart reflects the operating budget, not shown here is the 2.1 million in larger scale capital improvement projects. And finally, we expect to continue to refine the budget as we receive input and new information. We look forward to our detailed review with you next week, and we would love to hear from the community. You can email us, call us, or write us through the mail. We are asking that the mayor and council hold the record open until April 27th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Next week's workshop will be here at 7:30. People can participate here in person or with us via Zoom. And thanks for your time and attention, and thanks to all of the staff who worked so hard to put together tonight's proposed budget, with a special thanks to Nate and Acting Director Janice Hartman. And we might give a small thanks to our former director, Kim Francisco, who did a lot of heavy lifting before she departed her position. And with that, I'll take any questions you have.
All right, well, thanks to everybody involved. Appreciate the presentation, but appreciate even more that you guys have put together this budget. I want to note for anybody who's here or watching or planning to testify at some point, next week's work session, we will have public testimony, but it's going to be the first thing we do when we open up that meeting, and then we'll do our deep dive. So if you're trying to time it right, make sure you're on the Zoom or in person at 7:30, because we're going to go right to the public first. And with that, and I also wanted to commend staff for the charts that are easier to read for us colorblind folks. It really makes a big difference. It's not something I asked for. It's something staff just very thoughtfully did, and it's much appreciated. Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I will echo all the thanks and appreciation to Nate, Tanisha, all the rest of the staff who were involved. Not only are the charts really nice, but just sort of the general reorganization of the budget and the way it's presented thus far, I have found to be a lot sort of cleaner and more accessible, and I hope the public will feel that way as well as we continue in the process. And it's noticed and appreciated. Speaking of notice, I can't help but notice how many fewer members of the public are in the room as we discuss a public hearing for our $100 million budget compared to the last public hearing that we had a few minutes ago. But I know that we continue to get input from a lot of different methods, including surveys and outreach and emails and focus groups and all kinds of things that we're doing with respect to the budget, and we're incorporating all of that, and there's still plenty of opportunity for members of the public to weigh in. And maybe they just think we're doing such a good job with the budget they don't have much to comment on. But either way, we welcome their input, of course. I just wanted to flag a few things that, from my perspective, I'm going to be interested in talking about and hearing about at the work session, so I don't necessarily expect any detailed response to these questions, but these are some things that I just kind of noted as you went along in your presentation. One, the size of our contribution, our annual contribution to the housing fund. I know we decided not to get into the details of the housing fund in tonight's presentation, which is just an overview, and I'm sure we will get into it in the work session, but I'm sort of curious how that matches up with the overall amount that's been accrued in the housing fund and what our plan is in terms of spending that. Also, Tanisha and I have had a couple of passing discussions about the municipal utility tax, and I don't know how much you're planning to get into differentiation in the sort of categories of revenue that we have in some of the initial charts that were presented tonight, in terms of, here's the local property tax, portion of our revenue, how far kind of down and granular we want to get in terms of where different portions of that property tax revenue are coming from and why and all of that, but maybe a little delving into that might be interesting. You talked about the additional pressures on the costs of gasoline, obviously, that many of us are feeling. I guess those of us driving EVs aren't feeling it. But I wanted to ask about, I know there's sort of a long-term plan to convert more and more of our vehicle fleet to either hybrid or EV, and how that lines up with the operational costs of gasoline. Obviously, within 1 year, we're not going to be converting our entire fleet. Nobody's expecting anything like that. But just sort of thinking about that for the long term, in addition to how it affects us this year with this budget. So those were some things that I just wanted to kind of flag that I was interested in maybe discussing more next time at our work session. But otherwise, great presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to thank you for making it easy to digest. I have been through, as a member of the public, gone through the budget before, but just to be able to see all this at a high level is very helpful. I did want to ask, and I know that it was just passed, so we may not know the ramifications of it, but with the tax duplication issue being settled with the county, when do we expect that we might actually be seeing an increase in revenue sharing from the county, and which budget would we expect to start working that into?
Yeah. So we'll start seeing that increase next year. The increase is about 1.934 million. We'll see an additional $500,000 in FY24 and an additional $500,000 beyond that in FY25. So it does increase about 12% between FY23 and FY24, and then again another about 12% the next year.
Great. So these figures are incorporating what we're expecting in the increase
yes,
already?
These
Great.
are. That hearing was held, I think, March 9th? It was earlier this month. Kim Francisco was very lovely and texted me to let me know that the hearing was going on. So I was able to pay attention and follow along and see what was going on in live time.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you. Budgets are hard and complicated, and bless you guys for the work you do behind the scenes and then present these beautiful charts to us to make it able to consume it easily. So thank you. I just want to say thank you. I had a question about tax duplication, but you answered it.
Okay. Anything from you, Neil?
I'm going to hold my comments for next week when we're really doing the deep dive. I'm not entirely clear where the 98 million came from. It looks to me like it includes general fund and then transfers, but it seems like they're double counting some numbers, so I'd be very curious to see where that, because there's not that much income to add up to 98 million, so it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, it's because some of the general fund supports these other funds, so I can break that down a little more next week.
Yeah, I expect it won't be confusing next week, but it's confusing right now.
And Tanisha, next week you're going to discuss the impact of the ARPA funding as well, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is the time of the mayor and council like to hear from anybody in the public. And I'm looking around here. I'm always seeing staff, so I'm just going to go right over to Zoom. And if there's anybody on Zoom who'd like to speak, just use the Zoom raise hand function and I'll call on you. Going once. I see one hand so far, so tech team, if you could bring up Susie Ward, please. That would be great. Susie, just unmute yourself, state your name, address, and or neighborhood, go right ahead.
I am Susie Ward. I live at 437 Gaither Street in Deer Park. And I just had I have a question to try to understand the stormwater fund. I thought that I read something that, well, I'm not sure where it comes from. Do people who are developers who are doing a project, do they have to pay a certain amount, or where does that money come from, and what do we use it for?
Okay, we're going to answer that. Is that the extent of your testimony, Susie?
Yeah, I don't know that much about the budget, so yes, that's all. I just had that question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to testify? We will give a very brief answer to that.
I just wanted to. So on the stormwater fund, that money comes from the stormwater fee that everyone pays for impervious surface on their property. The current rate, I think, is $32 and something cents per.
Don't quote the fee.
I won't try to quote the fee. It's but essentially for all impervious surface areas, so meaning parking lots, any building improvements, anything like that, you're paying a fee with your tax, your tax notice for that stormwater. So that funding is all getting accrued. That goes toward restoration and creation of new stormwater facilities in the city with emphasis on treatment of that water. I'm still working with the stormwater program manager all the time to understand exactly what it means, but it has to do with permitting and cleanliness of the.
There are requirements placed on
Yeah.
us by the EPA and the state to have clean water, and stormwater is part of that process. Though we don't have our own sanitary sewer system, the city is responsible for managing stormwater in order to remain compliant and current with our permit. So that is really the driving force, and we try to do that through these projects that Nate mentioned before.
Yeah. Ryan, go ahead.
You beat me to it, Tanisha. I was going to say we need to make sure that we answer that question by explaining that this is generated by a federal and state mandate.
Yes.
That local governments do this in order to mitigate the impacts of stormwater.
On the Chesapeake Bay specifically.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
all the states that lie in the Chesapeake Bay watershed are impacted by this. And a typical fee, I think my fee for my house on my property tax bill, I think is $96. It's 3 of whatever those units are. It covers the impervious surface that is created by the fact that water doesn't leak into my house or into the ground from my roof.
I don't know
Yeah.
if we would count that. If you had a leak from the basement, that's still on you.
Okay, we're getting down a rabbit hole here. Suffice it to say, Susie, thank you for the question. There's a lot on our website on our stormwater program. Nate, you wanted to add
I
something?
did have one additional comment about tax duplication. I forgot to mention that in FY22, the county also allocated additional funds in the amount of about 1.2 million for us this year. So I did want to take a special minute to mention that.
And that's a one-time allocation that sort of sets us up for the new formula that kicks in the following year.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you for bringing
And
that up.
thanks to our mayor for testifying on the city's behalf and other cities' behalf for pushing forward tax duplication, which has been, a 4-decade?
Since 1987.
Yeah.
A very long negotiation.
Yeah, it's remarkable the progress that was made this year. So hopefully everything works the way we think it's going to work. And with that, I don't see any more hands up on Zoom. So let me go back to our recommendation. So staff recommends that we hold our record open until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, April 27th. And it doesn't say what the anticipated policy discussion date would be. Is that necessary, Lynn?
No, I think it's anticipated that we will approve the budget at the May 18th?
May 16th.
May 16th
May
meeting.
16th, okay. All right, so that's the recommendation. Do we have a motion from the council?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. So our record will be open until April 27th, and we'd like to hear from anybody who'd like to give us feedback. Thank you all very much for the presentation. Next, we're going to start with, from the mayor and city council, we're going to start with Council Member Harris.
All right, so it's been an interesting couple of weeks. First of all, just in case anybody in the public doesn't know, we had 2 birthdays at the dais in the last couple of days. The mayor's on Saturday and Lisa Henderson's yesterday, I believe, right?
Yesterday.
So all of you out watching this, hopefully you're singing happy birthday right now. We were supposed to have a St. Patrick's Day parade a week ago, but somehow we had a snowstorm that came out of nowhere. It was nice the few days before and nice after, but we rescheduled it, and it was a lovely day on Saturday. Good time was had by all. Let's see, on Friday, I think it was Friday morning, we had a meeting of the Business and Economic Development Committee, and I alluded to that in some comments earlier, but I'll just revisit them for a second, that the Walnut Hill Shopping Center has approached the city with some ideas on redevelopment, bringing a new grocery store and some other amenities there. That shopping center is not currently part of the city, but there is some negotiation going on to potentially bring it into the city. And so staff is doing really good work and bringing it to us, and I think the committee was very favorably disposed to everything we heard about that project, or to at least most of what we heard about it so far. So looking forward to hearing more and seeing what develops, and hopefully getting another grocery store where we need it at that end of the city. And we also talked about tax duplication. There was the ordinance or whatever the legislation was at the county level was passed, solving an issue that frankly I felt was never going to get resolved. I was convinced it was never going to get resolved, and somehow it got resolved. So great work by everyone. And kudos to the county executive and the county council for actually doing the right thing and making this thing happen. We did have the county council as our guests at a Maryland Municipal League chapter meeting this week. We had a discussion that a lot of it focused on the final resolution of tax duplication. And after that ended and the county council moved along, we had an interesting discussion of how to implement safety for bicycles in the various municipalities in the county, and we had a chance to share information amongst ourselves. And I think the discussion of what we do here in Gaithersburg to make bicycling safer and more accessible, and doing it in a more affordable manner was very well received by our counterparts in some of the other municipalities. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. We'll go to Ryan.
Thanks, Mayor. Hope everybody's enjoying an interesting March Madness. And as a Terp, I was a little bummed that our men didn't make it into the tournament this year. But our women are on to the Sweet 16. They're actually playing my other alma mater, Stanford, this Friday. So it's going to be a conflicted one for me, but I'm always going to side with the Terps. Good luck to them. So I'll echo what Neil said about wishing everybody happy birthday and about the parade. I do just want to add a particular shout out to all the staff and volunteers who prepped for the original parade, had to make the tough call to delay the parade a week, which we now all obviously see in hindsight was the best call. And then had to regroup and organize and run the parade again this past weekend. As we always do every year, I heard a lot of feedback and comments from members of different groups and the public who participated either as spectators or as marchers in the parade about how incredibly well organized our staff and volunteers are in running it. So kudos to all of you. It really is a wonderful event. It was a great way to kind of welcome, hopefully, the roaring back of in-person life in Gaithersburg and the region. Neil already mentioned the Montgomery County chapter meeting for the Maryland Municipal League, during which we met with several of the county council members, which is an annual occurrence. And this time we were obviously able to jointly celebrate the passage of the tax duplication resolution that Neil discussed. But I also wanted to just give an additional public shout out to Rockville Councilmember Monique Ashton, who is the current president of the Montgomery County chapter of the Maryland Municipal League, who really took on an incredibly strong and effective leadership role on this issue. Many people have participated over the decades in making progress on this issue, and they all deserve credit. But she helped get us over the finish line with her leadership, and I think she deserves a special note, as does the mayor for his persuasive testimony. So,
I mean, come on. It was support. Monique, you were right for Monique.
In addition, on March 9th, which, even though it's a while ago, was since our last formal business meeting, I went down to Annapolis with our assistant city manager, Tom Lonergan-Seeger, and others from around the state to make sure that we had a strong presence in support of legislation to resolve the issue of HUR, Highway User Revenue Funds, which are funds that are by state formula intended to be allocated to municipal governments every year to help pay for our road and other transportation projects. Over the years, through MML, we have had some really good wins in restoring HUR funds that had been previously decimated during the Great Recession, but those funds are now at risk of being lost again because there is a sunset provision on the temporary fix, and we need to make sure that we lift that sunset provision so that municipalities can have the certainty to be able to have long-term budgeting of the funding that they are supposed to be getting anyway through this formula in order to pay for our transportation infrastructure projects. And so I want to say thanks to the MML staff, the city staff, all the elected leaders, municipal leaders, and county leaders as well, who have really made a strong push this year to get this legislation passed. We are closely watching because today, as I was telling my colleagues before the meeting, is what they call crossover day in Annapolis, for those who don't know. By midnight tonight, in order for any piece of legislation to pass this year in Annapolis, it must pass the house that it originated in and be crossed over to the other house. So bills that started the Senate have to go to the House. Bills that started the House have to get to the Senate before midnight tonight, or else they die for the year. So we are watching highway user revenue and other important legislation to make sure that it gets crossed over to the other house so that it can continue to live on and hopefully finally be passed before the legislative session ends in early April. And we are hoping that some bills that we don't want passed that will be bad for Gaithersburg and other municipalities might not make it to the other house of the legislature by midnight tonight. So we continue to be working very carefully with a lot of our partners. And as we've said many times, Gaithersburg continues to have a good reputation and good influence in Annapolis, which brings a huge return on investment for our residents and businesses. And I'm glad to be able to be doing that in person again instead of attending all of our hearings and meetings in Annapolis over Zoom. I also had the opportunity to attend my first meeting of the Police Advisory Committee as its new mayor and council liaison. That was a nice gathering on March 15th. That was unfortunately by Zoom, but we'll be getting there. And then also attended my first meeting as the city's member on the board of trustees of the nonprofit group, the Friends of the Wells Robertson House, on March 17th. And looking forward to continuing to work with the other trustees to advance the important cause of supporting the Wells Robertson House that is owned and operated by the city. And I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. We'll go to Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank Chief Soroka and team for the security training that we did last week. It was very real. A little frightening, but it taught us that we're all responsible for the safety of the folks at the dais and for the public. So it was great training to understand the part that we all need to play to keep us all safe. So thank the chief and team for that. Also echo the comments on the Maryland Municipal League with the County Council. That was my first joint meeting of that nature, and it was very interesting to hear what the county's initiatives and objectives are going to be in the upcoming budget year. One of the programs or strategies or policies with crime at the level that the county sees it with crime rising. They're also looking at how do we attack that problem and at the same time keeping policing equitable and justice equitable. And a challenge of common policies along municipalities, along with the county, was spoken to, which is a big challenge. So I'm excited that the county is thinking along those lines to make those things commonly equitable. So kudos there. Also, the St. Patrick's Day Parade was a blast. first time, oh, of course, my first time from that angle, riding on the trolley, which was a whole lot of fun. And I didn't know what kind of crowds we were going to see with, coming out of COVID and the pandemic. So it was very exciting to see the folks along the side and how many people came out to support the city and to participate in the parade. So it was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. Kudos to the city staff, everyone who participated in putting it together the first time, and then being as agile as you were to switch and get it done the very next Saturday. It was fantastic. Also, and last, and I'll hold out for the gas from my colleagues here, that I've turned the appropriate age to now be a member of the Benjamin Gaither Center. You may gasp now. There you go. So I signed up today and got a membership at the Benjamin Gaither Center, and I'm thrilled to be not only the council liaison to the Senior Advisory Committee, but now a member of the Benjamin Gaither Center. So you will see me there hanging out and working out. So thank you.
That is dedication.
Gasping.
Okay.
Just reverence, no gasping, reverence.
We'll go to Jim.
That's the same reason I was able to get to a play at the Arts Barn, being the liaison. I too want to echo the happy birthday messages both to Councilmember Henderson and Mayor Ashman. And just, I want to extend my thanks to the staff. The parade was, as Lisa said, a blast. It was so nice to have my family there with me on the trolley and to see the crowds in person. We've had so many events canceled over the past few years. Even when campaigning, so many of the events that we normally would have, we didn't get to see the public. So it was really refreshing to be out there. And the luck of the Irish, we got a snowstorm, we got it to a 70-degree day. So as an Irishman myself, my great-grandmother was born in Carrick-on-Shannon. It was really nice to be there wearing of the green, and look forward to that and more city events in the future. I got an alert from my credit card today that somebody was stealing my credit card, my wife's credit card number. We got a fraud alert. So I just thought I would take the opportunity to remind everyone to protect your credit card numbers, protect your passwords. It's prevalent, even if you think you're using, your antivirus and real sites and all of that. It is very easy for those things to get scanned. So make sure that you are on top of that. I've already had people talk or attempt to file unemployment claims on my Social Security number. So it is, it's real. Identity theft is real. There are insurance policies out there that you can get now, relatively affordable. I have one now. So it's an important thing to safeguard yourself. I too want to thank Chief Soroka and the team for the security training. And I just want to talk to the community. I did mine separately because of the event that I had in my own personal life, having been through an active shooter. So I want to thank the city for understanding and really approaching that from a trauma-informed approach. We don't talk enough about mental health. And it's important to self-advocate for yourself. So know what your limitations are and be willing to have those conversations. If there's something that you aren't comfortable doing or there's an accommodation that you need in your workplace, it's important to have those conversations. So I want to thank Tanisha and I want to thank Chief for accommodating me and my experiences and make sure that I got the training that I need in a way that I could do that. So thank you very, very much. And I just want to thank all the people that came out today. It was great to see people in the chambers and as always, fired up and about an event, and that's what it's about. It's being engaged, and that's what led to me being sitting up at this dais. There was many a time that I was standing right over there and talking to this body and advocating on behalf of my neighborhood or taking positions on issues that were coming before the council, and that's what this is about. And it's exciting to be able to have that dialogue in person and see the process unfold as it's supposed to. So it's just one more sign of things hopefully getting back to normal as living with COVID is going to be. But I'm encouraged, and I invite all of you to come and check out a city council meeting when you have an opportunity. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Jim. I will join everyone in praise of staff and the community for St. Patrick's Day Parade was amazing. And just note that we have a book festival coming up, our next big event on May 21st. All the information, some of the best authors on the planet coming to speak and about their latest work and signed books. All the information you could want is on the GaithersburgBookFestival.org website, and follow us on Facebook for periodic announcements and promotions. We hope you'll be joining us. It is free to attend and free to park. Next, I will note that we have, as has been mentioned several times in this meeting, we have a work session next week, March 28th, 7:30 p.m., to go over our budget, operating and capital. And the next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, April 4th. And with that, we'll move on to From the City Manager, Tanisha.
Thank you, Mayor. So I became Tanisha O'Briley on Saturday, and I enjoyed that very much.
Welcome to the clan.
I just want to thank Councilmember Henderson for your contribution to the city's revenue stream with your membership at the GBC. Thank you for that. Otherwise, I yield my time, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, well then we'll move from Tanisha O'Briley to Tom Lonergan Seeger.
Tom O. Lonergan.
Tom O. Lonergan Seeger.
No O needed. Nationality.
Economic Development
He
Update.
shows up enough Irish.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. One item for you tonight. I wanted to mention that Miltenyi Biotech recently announced their planned relocation of the German company's North American headquarters from California to 1201 Clapper Road here in the city. The move will add about 130 jobs by the end of the year here in Gaithersburg, bringing its local headcount to about 300. Miltenyi, which specializes in cell research and therapy, does have about 4,000 employees globally and 6 North American locations, not including ours. But to clarify, Miltenyi has been here for several years. The company actually acquired the 147,000 square foot facility at 1201 Clapper back in 2018, and they've been slowly improving and expanding the interior of that space ever since. However, there is a backstory about Miltenyi that wasn't part of this release. Gaithersburg drew Miltenyi's attention when the company acquired Lentigen, a local company, in 2014. In fact, Lentigen was among the very first toolbox grant recipients that the city awarded back in 2013 when we gave them $1,100 to support job training costs for the company's then 22 employees. Over the intervening years, that business unit grew, thriving on the scientific and entrepreneurial skills of local talent. Miltenyi will soon vacate 25,000 square feet of leased space at 910 Clapper, and a new company, Caring Cross, will open there this September. Caring Cross is actually funded and founded by former Lentigen and Miltenyi alum Boro Dropulek. Officially established as a nonprofit, Caring Cross has a mission to develop a pipeline of affordable treatments via cell and gene therapies. Initial funding includes a grant from the Gates Foundation, part think tank, part business incubator and accelerator. The company will spin off new startups as R&D successes materialize. In fact, I wanted to mention the first such spin-off has already emerged with a focus on affordable permanent cure for HIV. Until Caring Cross moves in September, its 11 employees will work out of Launch Labs at 708 Quince Orchard Road, the biotech incubator space the city actually subsidized back in 2015. I wanted to thank our friends at Maryland Commerce for their assistance and support with this project, to our friends at Miltenyi for their continued investment in Gaithersburg, and happy birthday to you, Mr. Mayor. That's all.
$1,100 in hindsight looks like a pretty good investment.
Return
Not
on
bad,
investment. Return on investment.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Deb Moran, you are up. We're going to move on to ordinances, resolutions, and regulations and talk about our conversion of streetlights to LED.
Thank you very much. I'll try to make this as quick as possible, but the resolution before you is to amend the 4-year LED conversion contract that you guys approved in August of this year. There are two main changes to the contract that we are, or two main updates to the contract that we're seeking. The first is for this current year that we're in. We're seeking a change order for $30,069 to accommodate some of the unforeseen issues that we came across as we began the conversion. Notably that some poles in specific neighborhoods had the fixtures welded to them, so we have to cut them, and in doing so, we are damaging some of the wires. We also found that some of the wires have been damaged by creatures getting into the poles. So they are very hot and not safe to touch, so we don't want to wait for maintenance to be able to come out and fix them. We want to repair them right then and continue with the replacement. And then finally, on East Diamond Avenue, there are some decorative arms that do not support the weight of the new LED fixtures, so we found replacement that match identically to what's existing there, and you can see that. Unfortunately, it didn't print the packet page number on here, but on a slide or two down from where the cover sheet is. The second amendment to the contract is to allow us to make further updates as we continue to find issues with the streetlight inventory in the future. So the second part of the amendment would be to allow us to have up to $90,000 of change orders approved by the city manager without having to come before you. And with that, I will take any questions.
Questions, comments?
If I may.
Yeah, please.
I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer to me, but I just wanted to ask about the $90,000 authorization for the change orders. That's per year, but it doesn't necessarily mean we'll spend it per year.
Correct.
It's just kind of to be there as an authorization as needed.
Yes, correct.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions or comments, or if someone wants to move the resolution?
I'll move the resolution.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Next, Sean Stevens. Please join us. We're going to talk about our contract for armoring various dam shorelines.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The resolution before you tonight is to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract for armoring of various dam shorelines, specifically sites 1A, 1B, and 2, which I will discuss briefly in a little bit. On December 10th, 2021, the city issued RFB 2022-020 to obtain pricing for the availability, goods, and services of qualified contractor to protect the specified dams from shoreline erosion and to stabilize eroded areas, consisting of the provision of services to armor various high hazard and significant hazard dam shorelines as identified by the State of Maryland Dam Safety Division in their annual inspection of city high hazard and significant hazard dams. On January 12, 2022, the city received two bid proposals for the armoring of dam sites 1A, which is Lake Lynette upstream side, approximately 210 linear feet, site 1B, which is Lake Lynette downstream side, which is approximately 275 linear feet, and site 2, which is Lake Helene downstream side, approximately 225 linear feet. Staff recommends award to the lowest, most responsive bidder, HGS LLC, for the armoring of dam sites 1A, 1B, and 2 in the amount of $166,952. There are sufficient funds in the Stormwater Fund. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions, comments? Ryan, go ahead.
You didn't even look at me, that's scary.
I can just sense
You could
it.
sense it. Just curious if we have any sense as to why there was such a differentiation in the bids received. They're pretty far apart. I mean, obviously, if the low bidder is good and you all are recommending we go with the low bidder, that's great. We're saving a lot of money apparently. But I'm just curious.
The best reason I can give you, which we can discuss after the next resolution, is we only received two bids for these three sites. Obviously, one of the bids was extremely high.
Yeah.
The reason that the company that bid on the next three sites did not bid is they just didn't feel comfortable with the location of the sites and the equipment that was going to be needed to do that work. So they just chose not to bid those three sites. Overall, I think they would have been competitive. And as you'll see on the next three sites, I think that the top two companies were fairly competitive. These first three sites, sites 1A, 1B, and 2, are difficult sites for these companies to access and to perform this work.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, someone want to move the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Carries 4-0. Thank you very much, Sean.
Okay, this next resolution is to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract for the armory of various dam shorelines, sites 3, 4, and 5. On December 10th, 2021, the city issued RFP 2022-020 to obtain pricing for the availability, goods, and services of a qualified contractor to protect specified dams and shoreline erosion and to stabilize eroded areas, consisting of the provision of services to armor various high hazard and significant hazard dam shorelines as identified by the state of Maryland in their annual inspection of city high and significant hazard dams. On January 12th, 2022, the city received 3 bid proposals for the Armory of Dam Sites 3, which is Lake Kirsten, upstream side, approximately 310 linear feet. Site 4, which is Lake Varuna, upstream side, approximately 560 linear feet. And Site 5, which is Summit Hall Front Pond, upstream side, approximately 330 linear feet. Staff recommends award to the lowest, most responsive bidder, Apex Companies LLC, for the armoring of dam sites 3, 4, and 5 in the amount of $144,375. There are sufficient funds in the Stormwater Fund. Do you have any questions for me on this one?
Questions, comments? Ryan?
I'm good, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, someone want to move the resolution?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Sean.
It was nice seeing you all in person again.
Yes.
Looked like
Likewise.
Looked like the high bidder was planning to armor them in gold.
Right?
Really outrageously
It
high.
was a missed opportunity to move the damn resolution.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Okay, Dennis, come on up.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We're here under staff guidance related to a request from the Maryland Department of Transportation, the State Highway Administration, and the Federal Highway Administration, who is seeking concurrence, or the city's concurrence, on the impacts of Malcolm King Park as a result of the I-495, I-270 south portion of the project, related to the preferred alternative. This is a Section 4F evaluation to reach a de minimis finding. I wanted to cover a couple of things. The state was required to do public comment on this finding. There were a number of comments, 5 that are included in your packet. I wanted to point out that most of those comments related back to the supplemental DEIS, or the draft environmental impact statement. Once that was done, the state actually went back and refined what they thought the impacts were going to be on both parks. Initially, there was a finding on 2 parks, not just Malcolm King Park. And they reduced that amount to be only on the Malcolm King Park, to be approximately 0.5 acres. Some of that's permanent and some of it's temporary. The improvements are really related to the stormwater inlet there, or X-outlet. So that's really the impact. There won't be any impact to the park facilities, which is what you usually gauge to determine whether it's de minimis or not. And so if you look at the 4F sections as outlined in the memo, the things that you would look at would be, are you going to impact how the park is used, or the amenities on the park, or actually any kind of activity that's related to habitat. And none of those will actually happen with these improvements that the state is proposing. And so we're seeking guidance on whether you concur that it's a de minimis finding, and that would allow the city manager to sign that de minimis finding back to the state.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Mayor, thanks. Through no fault of staff, it sort of feels like in reviewing this material, the lead got buried a little bit just because of the order in which the SDEIS process happens. But once you see that, the updated version shows, such little impact compared to the original draft version, or supplemental version, whatever it's called. I think from a technical perspective, it's hard not to conclude that this impact is de minimis. I understand there are passionate feelings by some of the folks who wrote in to comment on the original supplemental, but sort of looking at it just from a sort of purely technical, clinical perspective, it seems like to me it would meet the definition of de minimis. But I wanted to just ask, is SHA still committed, even with this updated version, to giving us the other acreage for reforestation, or does that come off the table now?
No, they're proposing to make the trade. They wouldn't technically have to under a de minimis finding.
Right.
But they would give us that parcel that's adjacent to kind of the public works area that we're showing in Exhibit 5.
Right, and that was the larger parcel of the two, and the one that isn't already parkland.
Correct.
Right, so, given that, on top of the sort of technical evaluation of the updated, impacts, seems to me, I mean, there's no other conclusion than that this is in fact de minimis. That's my view.
Okay,
Agreed.
I agree too. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the explanation as far as the use of the park versus the square footage, or if this were a passive park, would this be a different finding? In other words, the impact on the...
Given the acreage, no.
Yeah, okay.
Now, if there was a larger acreage taking or something like that, again, there's always the mitigation part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if there is a finding where it does have an impact, the project can move forward if the state proposes some mitigation and the city would agree. And even if the city doesn't agree, it's just a longer process for the state in terms of the overall project.
But to Ryan's point, that they're still mitigating some of this impact by providing that additional acreage.
Correct,
Okay.
and they're not technically required to under 4F because if it's a de minimis finding, they don't have to provide any alternative.
All right, thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you, Mayor. Dennis, this read like a great story. It was scary in the beginning, and then when you got down to the end, you got the good news. That was perfect. So I really appreciated reading through this. One question. There was a comment about phase 2 being unknown and we should watch out and be careful. Can you comment on that?
So there is a northern portion of this project, the 495-270 project, which would actually go basically from 370 all the way up to 170 in Frederick. That has not gone through this similar process. It would go through a similar process. And so that would be something we would look at again and have conversations about impacts on parkland, because we would have more impacts probably in that scenario or possibly more impacts in that.
Okay, thank you.
So, is the guidance,
I think we got enough guidance, so I think we're done.
okay, all right,
We don't need a formal vote?
No.
Okay, all right.
okay, thank you, Dennis. From the city attorney.
I just wanted to provide you all this evening with a very brief update on the public charge rule. Those of you who have been on the council for a while do recall that the Trump administration imposed what's called the public charge rule that impacts an immigrant's ability to obtain either a green card or citizenship if they've ever received any kind of public benefit. And they describe public benefit very broadly to include some of the programs that the city provides to its residents. Once that happened, the city joined with several nonprofit groups and other municipalities, and we did file suit in federal court. And then there were several suits filed in other jurisdictions. Another jurisdiction other than Maryland did issue a preliminary injunction in the case. Obviously, we had a change of leadership on the federal level. So in our case, got put on hold. It's been stayed for quite some time at the request of the Biden administration, as they wanted to issue new rules to impact this particular area. The Biden administration did issue new rules actually just a couple weeks ago, and we are in the public comment period. So staff is currently working with our outside counsel in the case, as well as a number of other jurisdictions, to provide comments on the newly proposed rules. But the new rules basically go back to where we were prior to the Trump administration. We do think that there are a few little tweaks here and there that can also improve the rules, but certainly the focus is going to be able to, allow our residents to seek the assistance they need, both from the city, the county, and other state and federal agencies, while not having an impact on their ability to obtain citizenship or a green card. So again, I just kind of, in our case, it's still on hold until there's a final rulemaking in this particular case, and then it will most likely get dismissed. So I just want to, again, give you a little bit of an update on that important issue.
Thank you, Lynn. Anything from any other staff? Okay, not seeing any hands raised, and I will remind everyone that we have our budget work session next week on the 28th, and we hope you'll join us. And then the next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council is on Monday, April 4th. Until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.